So recently I came across an article that was very intriguing. And what I appreciate about this post is that we have a Black woman being incredibly honest. We have a Black woman admitting to what many have believed to be true about some Black women in the Black community, and that is that they envy white women, that they have this sense of jealousy for white femininity and what they perceive white women having. And she, in this article that I'm about to read, explains this explicitly. So before I break it down, be sure to like, share, subscribe to this video, and we'll get into it. The way I came across this article was actually quite interesting. For those of you who didn't know, before I got into YouTube about 3 years ago, I actually wrote. I got my background in comparative literature, and I spent almost the entirety of my corporate experience writing, editing, blogging, ghostwriting for businesses, small businesses, agencies, realtors, all kind of different industries. And so I put my writing on the back burner a bit, but I recently decided to start a Substack as a way to get back into writing and as a way to connect with people through the written word. If you haven't checked it out already, please be sure to do so. You can become a subscriber, become my first paid subscriber. But that is the backstory. Now, the thing about Substack is, like any social media platform, you want to connect with other writers who either have similar interests or maybe who just have backgrounds that you may connect with, or just topics that you want to follow in general. And so I came across this Black woman in Substack who seemed to have a pretty robust following. Substack is still a rather new social media platform. It's still growing, but she seemed to have a pretty robust following, and she talked exclusively about the experience of Black women. And so I took interest in that. And what I found early on is that, she pretty much talks exclusively about her experiences being a Black woman in a white space. So much so that her newsletter is literally entitled The Diary of a Black Woman in a White World. And so what I want to review to you is an article that she shared where it says, "Do Black men ever protect Black women like white men protect white women?" This is the article that we're going to break down. So if you look at it right here, one of the reasons, right, that there is this envy that some Black women have for white women is because of what they perceive white women as having. Mr. Z Black in Effect is someone I've heard talk about this time and time and time again, right? The myth of white womanhood and what that has meant for Black women and their perception as they go throughout life, as they have these experiences, and essentially how they measure their success, how they measure their blessing, how they measure their experience with respect to the white woman that they see. And this article breaks it down. It literally breaks it down in detail. This is why I want to read it. So it starts by saying, "For years in corporate, I watched white men promote and protect their own. That is, white men and white women. When the strong push for gender diversity began in the late 90s, white men increasingly mentored, promoted, and protected white women. I remember thinking how lucky white women were because they had a true ally in the workplace." You guys, okay, again, we're hearing this right out the gate. Right out the gate, she's letting you know, look, man, these white women are lucky. Like, they are privileged because they have their men on their side, batting for them, supporting them, helping to put them in positions of power, helping to ensure that they are having an enjoyable experience. Let's continue. It says, "As a Black woman, I won't lie, it's been challenging to find a true ally, a champion in my place of work. Most often, white men know we, Black women, are not even competition to them because of all the privileges that they have being male and white. White women have a love-hate relationship with us, oftentimes envious of our physical traits, and Black men see us as threats because we represent the double diversity agenda, ethnicity, and gender." Now, this part is where it starts to get really interesting. In my experience, I just don't really think white women envy Black women like that. I really don't. I mean, I know there's the Botox, right? And I know there is, the tanning and the different things. But I think by and large, white women are actually quite happy being white. They really are, because they know intrinsically, consciously or subconsciously, that being white in a white nation and having white features is going to be to their benefit. So I really don't think white women envy Black women in that way. Maybe they were like, oh, I'd like your dairy, I'd like your butt, or maybe I like that you're curvy, whatever, like when it's trendy. But like by and large, I really don't think white women envy Black women the way that we think. I think that's something we tell ourselves maybe to feel better about ourselves, but in a white society, I don't think that's true. And now regarding her position that Black men see Black women as a threat, that is an interesting position. I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know if I fully agree with that, but also I'm not a Black man. So you guys, let me know, what do you think? Do you agree? Are Black women threatened by Black women in the corporate space, or is she just making this up? Let's continue. It says, what has surprised me the most is the number of times Black men have thrown me under the bus rather than defended me. They see Black women as competitors and they work to weaken or kill that competition regardless of what you may think. We are not friends. All the sabotaging that Black and also brown men do to Black women makes the workplace a lonely and isolating experience for a competent, confident, secure, and assertive Black woman. Okay, so real quick, these two paragraphs to me were especially intriguing because this woman, to my understanding, is married to a white man. She is married to a European. She actually explains this in some of her previous blogs. So this is, really you start getting into cultural dynamics of, are Black men expected to protect you when you date and marry out? I think this paragraph right here really elicits that conversation, because there are some who would say no. They say, hey, once you've divested or you've dated and married out or you've married into another community, that's fine. That is totally your right, but it is now their responsibility to do so. You married a white man. You are surrounded by white men. They themselves should be, quote unquote, protecting you. Your first line of protection is your husband, is your white husband, and then the community that he's connected with. So why, if you married into that white community, are you not looking to them to protect you? Why are you looking to us, right? And so some Black men are going to say this. Now, other Black men are going to say, no, it doesn't matter who they marry. Like, a Black woman is a Black woman. Like, we have to stick together. And so, you might have a varying point of view on this position, but I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts on this particular paragraph, but I did think it was quite interesting. Okay. Then it says here, nothing made me so aware of this than when I worked for a Black man. When Thomas, fictional name, was appointed to head the team I worked in, I was over the moon. It was the first time in my career that I had a Black boss. Now, some of you might think that I'm being too dramatic, but the reality is when you've spent most of your career without seeing someone who looks like you in a position of authority, you sort of get desperate for that to happen. No matter what you think, representation matters. You need to see someone that looks like you make it in life. It's important for your well-being and mental health. It's also important for your motivation. Actually, it's critical. So again, she's talking about her experience being a Black woman who's working in a white space. It's isolating. Not surprising. And because it's isolating, you might want to have times where you see people who look like you. Okay, got it. Moving on. In my first meeting with Thomas, he asked a few questions about my background and what I did on the team. I thought that our conversation was a good one. That was until I found out he had talked to my other white colleagues about their development and future. He's asked them all to let him know what were the next steps in their career, and he offered to help them get there. That's not the type of discussion he had with me. At first, I thought it was a small oversight on his part until I realized it was systematic. Other team members had clear roles and responsibilities and a development path. My position remained ambiguous between being his admin and the person who prepared his briefs. I had no concrete development plan in place like the others. I couldn't understand why he wasn't treating me fairly. I finally had a Black boss, and he was treating me worse than my white bosses had ever treated me. It affected me. So there she's basically talking about, she has a Black male boss, and it seems to her that he is privileging the white people. He's privileging his white, I can't even say colleagues, but the white people that he's managing over her. And she gets a little hurt about that. Now, a couple of things I think to touch upon here. If you guys saw the video I just posted, it was of basically a Black admin, a Black female admin who admitted to not helping a Black male student with a letter of recommendation, not because he was qualified, but because he was male, right? And so I broke that down in my previous video. And now we have another situation of a Black man in a position of power who, based upon, what she's saying, is not working to try to help put another Black person in a position of power to help elevate them. Right. And so these are the complaints that you'll hear from Black men and Black women, that, hey, when we're working in these spaces, we're not really working together to stick together. Now, the reality is, when you're working in a white institution that was initially created by and for white people, you, first of all, one, cannot be surprised if you feel isolated as a Black person or as a minority. And two, you also can't be surprised if you find yourself fighting and competing with other minorities, because ultimately it was not made for you in mind. The corporate space wasn't made to try to help build the Black community, try to help improve the Black community. It wasn't. And so when you see white people in corporate spaces that they created and they owned favoring other white people, that's like, well, duh, like that's what they do because they created it for themselves. But when you don't see Black people working together to go and build and move, it's partially because they didn't create that space. Like it's not really for them. So the environment, in my opinion, the environment itself dictates that it's dog eat dog, that it's a dog eat dog world, that it's certainly not a place for community building, because that was never the intention. So I understand wanting to have a place of solidarity or wanting to have a place where you can come together and all that kind of different stuff. But ultimately, you're hard pressed to get that in a corporate setting. You are, unless they go out of the way to try to do DEI. And even right now, DEI is kind of overran by LGBTQ plus and, other movements that's kind of dominated. But outside of that, or if you are actually working in a literally Black owned business, I don't, expecting to have some form of Black camaraderie, I think, is kind of hit or miss in a system that was, again, set up and created by white people. So what she's saying to me, or what she's saying, doesn't necessarily seem out of the ordinary, unfortunately, given the setup, And then on top of that, one might ask, okay, what is the energy that you're giving off? Some might ask that. It's like, was there this expectation that, was there a certain energy, or was there a certain way that you were treating this person that made him come at you a certain way? Who knows? I mean, I'm not saying that it's right, but I'm just, there's two sides to every story. At top, she said, an assertive Black woman. And assertive Black woman, it could just be assertive. And sometimes it can come off as like a bad B behavior. And I don't really know. I don't know this person, right? So I can't say either or, but I'm just saying those dynamics already exist in the Black community. And unfortunately, you can get in these white spaces, but kind of still have that, that tension that can bleed over into these Black and Black relationships in this toxic space. Because I do think corporate can be toxic to certain people. Anyways, let's continue. It says, I was patient, but after 2 years in this situation, I realized that I had to find a way to move out of his team. I was lucky and did find a new internal opportunity, but when I told Thomas I was leaving, he refused to let me go, citing a company policy that gave him the right to keep me on his team for a notice period of up to 2 months. My new boss couldn't wait for that long for me. Thomas simply refused to let me go, stating that there was important milestones that I needed to deliver. After weeks, negotiations were at a standstill, and so I went to see him. You see, Rebecca, it looks bad for me if you leave my team. I can't let you tarnish my reputation. He said, it took me a hot minute to understand he didn't care about me at all. It was the way it made him look. That I, known to be a doer and top performer, would leave his team and that this would reflect badly on him. That was all he was worried about, and he was ready to keep me there for as long as it took so he wouldn't have an image problem. This is a great opportunity for me, Thomas. It will allow me to learn new things and progress professionally. I don't want to decline this opportunity, I pleaded. You're being played, Rebecca. Robert is trying to hire you to get at me. He hasn't been able to harm me all these years, so now he is trying to take away my good people, Thomas said. It was the first time he had ever referred to me as one of his good people. I was surprised. I need to go to my next meeting, he said, interrupting my thoughts. Okay, I replied. A few minutes later, he was gone. So this is why you have certain Black folks in general who want nothing to do with corporate. Some people believe that corporate is just a modern, refined version of slavery. If you believe that logic to be true, and you are on a quote unquote modern plantation, of course you cannot be surprised when Black folks are selling each other out. That happened then, right, on the plantation, and it's happening now. Now, is this a reflection of the entirety of Black men? Absolutely no way. Do Black men do that? Absolutely. Do Black women do that? Absolutely. But I'm like, you have to consider the environment. That's really important. Continue. I sat there alone in the meeting room trying to analyze what I had just heard. At the end of the day, what Thomas really wanted was for me to decline the job so that he could continue to reap the benefits of having a top performer in his team without giving me anything in return while holding on to a good reputation. Something had to give. I decided to continue with my plans to move to the new team and to involve human resources if he didn't let me. That was an open declaration of war, and he made me pay for it. He started spreading rumors that I had dropped all my projects in his team without seeing to it that there was a proper handover. He said our external stakeholders were discontent and that this was affecting the company's reputation. He questioned my professionalism. He said I was unreliable and had not met key objectives that year. I found myself in the middle of a misinformation campaign. I went to see him again. This time he was mean. I told you I don't want to look bad, Rebecca. I have worked in your team for 2 years, Thomas. I honestly think that it is healthy for me to seek new opportunities, I replied. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that you are betraying me, he snapped, a deep frown on his face. I'm not betraying you, my voice trailed off. I was tired of defending myself. He sat there staring at me, stubborn, unyielding, uncompromising. I tried to reason with him, but to no avail. He just kept on berating me for wanting to leave and again questioned the quality of my work. It was a really difficult meeting for me, especially since I had given him my all for years, but he had never promoted me or supported a development plan for me. I remember how happy I had been when he had been appointed. I had so many realistic expectations of what it would be like to work for someone who looked like me. Now it turned out that he was going to be the largest thorn in my side, and he sat there expressing his disappointment at me. I began to cry. I couldn't help myself. I felt more like it was he who was betraying me. I didn't manage to leave his team in the end, but this whole experience and other similar betrayals taught me that Black men don't necessarily have Black women's backs, at least not at work. Only once in my entire 30-year career has a Black man stood up for me and protected me. As Black women, we are often all alone. Sometimes, I must admit, I feel envious when I see the support that white men give to white women. And let's be clear, I'm not advocating for incompetent people to get jobs just because they share a common ethnicity. But I'm saying is, if you are good and competent, an internal advocate who looks like you and understands your unique challenges can help you climb the corporate ladder. Today, I have no expectations when I meet Black male colleagues. I know that there are very few that will stand up for me, build an alliance with me, mentor or protect me. That's a dream that I woke up from a long time ago. Okay, guys, so you got it. I mean, now I want to go back right here real quickly where she pretty much gets to the main point that I really wanted to tease out, right? I must admit, I feel envious when I see the support that white men give to white women. I mean, she says it clearly. She expresses it clearly. And that's what I really appreciated about this article, just how matter of fact and open she was. Now, let me reiterate. White people who created white institutions for them and by them, promoting other white people is not surprising. That's what you would expect. That's what you should expect. You also should expect, if that institution was not made for you and your community in mind, you can't be surprised when you feel lonely, one. And you also can't be surprised if there's not a space in that system for you to build your own community. Because it was never about that. And as I mentioned before, for those who take the mindset that the corporate world is like a refined modern version of slavery, and the corporate world is a refined modern version of the plantation, if you take that perspective, then all this is two Negroes on the plantation arguing, bickering and fighting and not getting along. And that happened all the time. Nothing is new. So to a certain extent, not that I want to downplay how troubling corporate is, because corporate is very troubling. But I think it's good to be able to tease out these ideas and then also be really clear about what is realistic to expect. If you are a Black person and you want to be advocated for as a Black person, it's really going to be hard to expect that in a white corporate system. It just is. I think if you want to expect that, you pretty much have to go into a system that was created by Black people or be in a society where it is predominantly Black, so you don't have to worry about that. And or what we always talk about, find yourself working in a Black business where there are Black people there advocating and working together. Like if that's something that is really important to you, this is why you see Chinese communities coming over here, you see Korean communities coming over here, you see Indian communities coming over here, setting up shop. creating their own supermarkets, creating their own restaurants, setting up their own dentist offices, their own businesses, their own bakeries. They set up shop and then they employ their own. Partially for this reason, so that they can have people who understand their experience and can help tend to their unique cultural needs. This is what businesses, cultures do to help mitigate that problem. And I think if somebody wants that, then the way to go about that is to help support men and or people in the community who are helping to create a system such as the one that I just described that keeps your culture in mind. But again, now you're talking about community building. Now you're talking about working with other Black people. You're primarily talking about working with Black men who are going to build those institutions and help establish those things on maybe a small local level or on a larger level. If that is a cultural value to you, then there are things that you can do to position yourself to avoid those situations. But if you decide to actually marry a white man, as this individual did, they, to a certain extent, truly remove themselves from being able to have that experience in its entirety. Because, by marrying into the white community, marrying into a white family, you are now basically committed to assimilating to a certain extent into that community. And the reality is that community comes with exactly what she described. And going back to what she said before, to Black people on the quote, corporate plantation, unquote, fighting for positions, competing, again, not surprising because it wasn't meant for them. And so, yeah, it brings up a lot of different questions, but ultimately, it's simple. I think if you want to be respected as a Black person, and if you want your Blackness to be respected, then you go to a Black country, you go to spaces that you maybe work for a business that is ran by Black folks, for Black folks. Or, in her case, you just try to get along as best as you can, but also just be aware that there's going to be times where you just feel alone and isolated. That just kind of comes with the territory. But anyways, guys, those are my thoughts, y'all. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Did I miss anything? Again, be sure to check me out on Substack. I will be releasing fresh content there that I do not release anyone else. Certain things I think are just easier to cover off in the written word. Also, if you want to check out her content, she does have some really interesting articles. She talks very candidly about her experience as a, in her words, a Black woman in a white world, a Black woman married to a white man, what that has been for her, what that has meant, and the different series of racism she has had to endure consistently. So check her out if you're interested in learning more about her content and her perspective. And thank you so much for listening if you've gotten this far, and we'll talk later, okay? Bye.